Hello there. I am going to be inking this angry tiki head guy that I drew using the Manga Studio 5 brushes that I created and have available for sale on my website. So I will also be sort of walking you through and explaining the settings and the process I use for inking. So here we go. Once I have the pencil drawing, I always convert it by going to layer property to this blue line. Makes it a lot easier to see or to keep the ink and the pencil separated. And we're going to turn the opacity way down. I always have a second window opened up of the image zoomed out, and sometimes, like in this case, I've mirrored the image, which is something cool that you can do in Manga Studio that you can't do in Photoshop, is have the exact same window or the same file, but have another window of it flipped. And this really helps me kind of like catch mistakes that I wouldn't normally see as I'm inking. So let me show you the main brushes that I use. I have this one here called the expressive brush, and I use this almost primarily. It's really hard to describe, but it works for me kind of the way like a stiff nib would work. It's the way I used to ink years ago. It's got a lot of pressure variability. You can kind of make interesting shapes. Other than that, I often use this Fat Maru brush from Manga Studio 4. I had made a bunch of changes to it and then imported it from Manga Studio 4, and I use this one all the time too. And then when I'm not using those, I often just use the default G pen that comes with Manga Studio 5 and the mapping pen. Mapping pen is really good for like shading things when you're doing that kind of stuff. Other than that, let's see. Yeah, this is a nice one too. There is if I'm trying to make things look a bit rougher, there are these three rough brushes that I use a lot. There's this rough bristle brush here. You can see actually kind of has some points, and this is kind of nice for chopping things up and making texture, and also just making some rough edges. And then this pencil textured is nice because when you get to like a really fine tip, there's a texture to it. Like it's almost like it's dragging against the paper. And I will use that one usually not when not for like comic book inking, but in situations where I kind of need things to look less computer-ish, you know, computer-y, I don't know what the right term is. And then this one is a square pen. This is also nice. It's got sort of a calligraphy feel to it, so that's really cool for making like also more organic strokes. And I'll use that one too from time to time. But I think for this guy, we're just gonna start with the Maru brush. And what I like to do, or the theory is, I always say that I like to do this and then I always forget, but I like to first draw the main outlines, the main shapes, before I get bogged down in any detail. And The reason is if you don't do that, it's really easy to kind of get lost. You might spend a ton of time on something that doesn't exactly matter, but more importantly, you start losing sight of what the actual forms are that you're drawing, and that's no good. So when I ink, I try not to actually change the size of my brush very often, because for me that can kind of get confusing too. I like to just let the pressure sensitivity do that work for me. There are a lot of strokes, especially around the outlines, that I kind of do a feathering technique. You just go over it again and again to expand it and shape it. For me, I find that easier than trying to hit like a perfect stroke. So I'm going to use this Maru brush for most of the main outlines, and then I'm going to go back in with the expressive brush and do a lot of the details. See, I'm already getting caught up in that, and I shouldn't be. This is a technique I do a lot too that you can't, well, I shouldn't say you can't do it, but it's a lot harder to do on paper with traditional ink, which is switching to transparency and kind of carving away at the line. I do that a lot to make corrections to the line, and then also just to add texture to it in some areas. I find that the faster you move your stroke, the more natural and straighter it's going to be. It just takes a lot of practice to make it accurate every time, and I'm not even, I would say I'm accurate maybe 30% of the time, so I'm working on it. You can also turn on, I have stabilization set to just 2, which is pretty tiny. But you can crank the stabilization up, and that'll give you like these nice smooth curves. But as you can see, that slows things down, and then if I were to ink this whole thing with that stabilization turned on, you'd probably get something without a whole lot of personality. So I don't depend on that, but I'm going to use it here when I'm drawing these, when I have to draw something that's circular. Because if I try it freehand, I'm going to screw it up. And I should really, I always forget to rotate more than I do. And I should do that more, because when I'm actually inking on paper, I spin that, I spin the paper around like crazy. It's almost never straight. I would love to get the one of the touch models of the Cintiq someday, because it seems like that would be awesome to just move this around with my hand. They're insanely expensive though. I think adding the touch, I'm pretty sure that adds like another $300, maybe more, maybe another $400 to the price tag, which is already pretty steep. And I'm constantly looking over here on the left to my smaller screen, because I want to make sure that what I'm drawing is still legible at a small size. Especially this guy here that I'm doing is going to be for a sticker. I'd also like to do some other things with them, but that's mainly what it's for, so it's going to be printed pretty small. Often when I'm doing ellipses or circles like that, I flip the screen, because for whatever reason I work much more accurately going from left to right. One thing you should definitely check out if you're using a Cintiq, or I guess any kind of tablet, is it's a gaming pad called a Nostromo by Razer. It's basically designed for, like, I guess World of Warcraft type games, or just computer games with a lot of keys, and it's designed to fit in your left hand. And then it's got a keypad with like 16 keys on it, and then a little joystick for your thumb, and a scroll wheel. And what I do is I use it basically to program all of the keys that I would usually use with the keyboard, because if you're using the 24 HD, there's not a whole lot of room for your keyboard. I actually have my keyboard velcroed to the top of the Wacom, but I use this Nostromo all the time. Like, it's always in my left hand, and that's also velcroed to the tablet itself. The new Wacom, the new like 27-inch, I see they like improved on that. It comes with its own like little puck. Excuse me. And that looks pretty sweet. But I love this thing because the thumb joystick, you can program 8 different shortcuts into it. So just by like moving your thumb a tiny little bit in one direction, it can choose my pen, or it can choose the paint bucket, or it can go to, like, what do I got here? Like the wand. So, or even one movement will turn a selection on and off. Or I'm sorry, like hide a selection, which is really, really helpful. Let me zoom in here. I want to show you why I love this brush. I love these sort of triangular shapes you get just by varying up the pressure and moving real quick. I love that stuff. these gauges in his ear, I want to use the do a perfect circle here, because if I screw that up, it's going to look pretty weird. So I'm going to use a figure ruler. There we go. Time for the smoke. Usually I will crank the stabilization up on this quite a bit. Okay, that looks good. And with the smoke, I found like you don't want to sit here and trace your pencils because it'll start to look rigid. And I want it to look really, I guess, free, a lot of movement. So I'm just going to use the pencils kind of as a guide. I keep going back on a lot of these strokes because you want to keep it pretty thin compared to the rest of the outlines. Okay, so now I got the main outlines carved in, and I just kind of make sure. I'll sometimes turn off the pencils. If anything needs like thickening up, I'll go over there and do that. Alright, cool. I'm happy with that. Let's turn the pencils back on. One thing I like to use a lot is this Lasso Fill tool. Is awesome. It's basically just a lasso, and when you draw and let go, it just fills it with your foreground color. But it's really cool for just blobbing in some shapes that are a little tricky to get with a brush, you know. So I'll use it here for this, the reflections on his nose ring. Alright, cool. So let's switch to this expressive brush here. Let's see if I got it. Yeah, turn the stabilization down. Okay, I'm getting close to wrapping this dude up as far as the inking goes. This is a stage where I often go too far, and I gotta scale things back. Like I'll put in too much detail, and then you start to lose the whole picture. So I'm trying to get better at that, at knowing when to put on the brakes. Because I always have to remember when I color this thing, there's going to be a whole, a whole level of detail there as well. So you gotta leave space for the color to go. All right. Cool. Okay, so let's turn off the pencils. I usually at this stage, I usually end up adding a lot more shadows if things aren't standing out well enough on their own. All right, there we go. One tiki head ready to be colored. So thanks for watching. The next video will be a tutorial on how we color this guy. If you're interested in checking out my brushes, you can purchase them at www.flylanddesigns.com. Thanks.